This is Max and Mia podcast.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Max and Mia podcast. I'm Max.
And I'm Mia. Thanks for joining us today.
We really appreciate you taking the time to listen, whether you're here for the first time or you've been with us from the beginning.
Before we dive into today's topic, we actually want to hear from you directly.
That's correct. We've been putting together these conversations for a while now, and we think it's the perfect moment to ask, what would you like us to discuss in future episodes?
Are there specific topics you'd be interested in? Maybe current events, culture, daily life situations, or something more specialized.
And beyond the topics themselves, we'd love to know if there's anything about the format that could work better for you. Perhaps the length, the structure, or even elements we could add to make these episodes more useful.
Your feedback genuinely helps us shape the direction of this podcast. We're here to create content that actually serves your learning goals and interests.
So please, leave a comment and tell us what you'd like to hear more of or less of.
We read every single comment, so don't hesitate to share your thoughts.
All right then, let's get into today's episode.
So, what do we have prepared for today?
We're going to be listening to several conversations together, real, practical dialogues that you'll likely encounter in everyday situations.
These are the kinds of exchanges you hear in TV shows, YouTube videos, streaming platforms, basically in real English content.
And that's why they're so valuable. Not only will they help you expand your vocabulary, but they're also great practice for improving your listening skills.
I think that's one of the most challenging aspects for learners, understanding natural speech in different contexts.
Absolutely. When you expose yourself to these realistic scenarios, you start recognizing patterns and expressions that textbooks don't always cover.
Right, so we'll be analyzing each conversation, breaking down useful phrases, and looking at some interesting grammar structures along the way.
Let's start with our first dialogue. This one focuses on something we all do but sometimes struggle with in another language, giving and receiving compliments.
It's interesting because compliments can be tricky. Different cultures have different ways of responding to them.
True. In this conversation, we'll see how native speakers typically handle these exchanges. But beyond just the compliments themselves, there are a couple of grammar points worth paying attention to.
Such as?
Well, for one, we'll encounter the causative structure. You know, when you talk about having someone do something for you or getting something done by another person.
Like, I had my hair cut or I got my car repaired.
Precisely. It's that construction where the subject arranges for an action to be performed, usually by someone else.
And what else should listeners focus on?
Question tags. Those short questions we add at the end of statements to confirm information or invite agreement.
You're coming tomorrow, aren't you? That sort of thing.
Correct. They're everywhere in spoken English, so it's definitely worth understanding how they work.
All right. Let's listen to the conversation then.
Hey, Vanessa. I almost didn't recognize you for a second there.
Oh my goodness, it's been what, 3 months?
Something like that. But wow, you look fantastic. Did you do something different?
You noticed! I just got my hair colored last week. I've been thinking about going lighter for ages, and I finally went for it.
Well, it suits you perfectly. The highlights really bring out your features.
That's sweet of you to say. Honestly, I was nervous about the change, but my stylist convinced me. She said it would brighten up my face.
She was right. And is that a new jacket too?
This old thing? I've had it for a while, but I never really wore it much. I'm trying to actually use the clothes in my closet instead of always buying new stuff.
Smart approach. It looks great on you, though. Very stylish.
Thanks. So what about you? You seem different too. Have you been working out?
A bit, yeah. I started going to the gym about 2 months ago. Nothing too intense, just trying to stay consistent.
It shows. You look healthier, more energetic somehow.
I appreciate that. I've been feeling better too, which is the main thing. Oh, and I finally got my apartment painted.
Really? You'd been talking about that forever, hadn't you?
I know, I kept putting it off, but I hired a crew last month and they finished it in 3 days. The place looks completely transformed now.
That must feel refreshing. What colors did you go with?
Mostly neutral tones, grays and whites. I wanted something clean and modern. My old walls were this awful beige color from the previous tenant.
I can imagine. Hey, we should grab coffee sometime soon and catch up properly. You're still in the same neighborhood, aren't you?
I am, yeah. There's that new cafe that opened on Madison Street. Have you been there yet?
Not yet, but I've heard good things about it. Someone told me they have incredible pastries.
Their croissants are amazing. I go there most Saturday mornings now. It's become sort of a ritual.
Sounds perfect. How about this Saturday then? Are you free in the morning?
Let me check. Yeah, Saturday works for me. Around 10?
10 is great. I'll actually be nearby anyway. I'm having my car serviced at that mechanic shop down the street.
The one next to the library?
That's the one. They're supposed to fix my brakes and do an oil change. It shouldn't take more than an hour, so the timing works out nicely.
Perfect. We can walk over to the cafe together after you pick up your car.
Sounds like a plan. Oh, before I forget, did you ever hear back about that job opportunity you mentioned last time we talked?
Actually, yes. I got the position. I start next month.
Blake, that's wonderful. Congratulations. You must be thrilled.
I am. It's a big step up. And honestly, I wasn't sure they'd choose me. The competition was pretty fierce.
Well, they made the right choice. You're incredibly talented.
Thanks, Vanessa. That means a lot coming from you.
I mean it. You've always been dedicated to your work. This is well-deserved.
I appreciate the support. So, yeah, lots of changes happening lately.
For both of us, it seems. Life keeps moving forward, doesn't it?
It does. All right, I should probably get going. I have a meeting in 20 minutes.
Of course. I'll see you Saturday then.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Me too. Take care, Blake.
You too, Vanessa.
That was a nice, natural exchange between two friends. What stood out to you, Mia?
Well, first of all, the way they gave compliments felt genuine. Blake didn't just say, "You look good." He was specific about what he noticed.
That's an important point. When you're complimenting someone, being specific makes it sound more sincere. For example, saying your highlights bring out your features is much more meaningful than just nice hair.
And Vanessa's responses were interesting too. She didn't just say thanks and move on. She explained the context, that she'd been nervous, that her stylist convinced her.
Right. That's very common in English-speaking cultures. People often downplay compliments a bit or share the story behind whatever is being complimented. It keeps the conversation flowing.
I noticed something else. When Blake said, "I got my apartment painted," he wasn't the one painting it himself.
Correct. That's the causative structure we mentioned earlier. I got my apartment painted means he arranged for someone else to paint it. If he'd painted it himself, he would have said, "I painted my apartment."
Same with Vanessa saying, "I got my hair colored and I'm having my car serviced." She's not doing these things herself. Professionals are doing them for her.
Precisely. And this structure is everywhere in daily conversation. I need to get my laptop fixed. She had her teeth cleaned. They're getting their house renovated. It's one of those patterns that, once you recognize it, you'll hear constantly.
There was also that question tag Vanessa used. You'd been talking about that forever, hadn't you?
Yes, and notice how it works. The statement was positive, so the tag becomes negative. If the statement had been negative, like you hadn't decided yet, the tag would be positive. Had you?
It's almost feels like a confirmation, but it also invites the other person to elaborate.
Exactly. It keeps the conversation interactive rather than just making statements at each other.
One more thing I'd point out. The way they made plans felt very casual, but clear. They didn't over-explain or get too formal about it.
That's the balance you want to find in friendly conversations. Clear enough that everyone knows what's happening, but relaxed enough that it doesn't feel like you're scheduling a business meeting.
All right, let's move on to our next dialogue. This one takes place in a completely different setting.
Immigration control, to be specific.
Now, this is a situation that can be stressful for many people, especially if English isn't your first language.
Absolutely. There's already some pressure just from the formal nature of the interaction, and if you're worried about understanding the questions or expressing yourself clearly, that pressure increases.
Which is why it's so valuable to familiarize yourself with these kinds of exchanges beforehand.
The questions are usually pretty standard, but knowing what to expect and how to respond appropriately can make the whole process much smoother.
And there's a grammar point that comes up frequently in these situations that's worth paying attention to.
The difference between past simple and present perfect. Immigration officers often want to know about your travel history, your current trip, how long you've been somewhere, whether you've visited before. These questions naturally bring out both tenses.
It's one of those grammar distinctions that really matters for clarity. If you say, I visited this country versus I've visited this country, you're actually communicating different things.
Right. Past simple tells us about a completed action at a specific time in the past. Present perfect connects the past to the present in some way. Maybe it's relevant now, or the exact time doesn't matter, or it's something that could still continue.
Let's listen to this conversation and see how these elements play out in a real immigration scenario.
Good afternoon. May I see your passport, please?
Of course. Here you go.
Thank you. So you're arriving from London today?
That's right. I had a connecting flight there, but I originally departed from Madrid.
I see. And what's the purpose of your visit to the United States?
I'm here for tourism. I'm planning to visit some national parks and spend time in a few cities.
How long do you intend to stay?
3 weeks. I have a return flight booked for the 28th of next month.
Have you been to the United States before?
Yes, I visited about 5 years ago. I went to New York and Washington, D.C. for about 10 days.
And where will you be staying during this trip?
I've booked hotels in different locations. I'll start in San Francisco for 4 days. Then I'm heading to Yosemite National Park. After that, I'll be in Los Angeles for a week.
Do you have confirmation of these reservations?
Yes, I have everything on my phone. Would you like me to show you?
Well, it won't be necessary right now. Are you traveling alone?
I am, yes. My partner was supposed to come with me, but she couldn't get time off work at the last minute.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a graphic designer. I work for a marketing agency in Barcelona.
And your employer is aware that you'll be away for 3 weeks?
Absolutely. I've arranged this trip months in advance, and I've cleared it with my supervisor. I actually have an email confirmation if you need to see it.
That's fine. How much money are you bringing with you for this trip?
I have about $3,000 in cash and credit cards. I've also got access to my bank account if I need more.
Have you packed your luggage yourself?
Yes, I packed everything myself yesterday evening.
Has anyone given you anything to carry for them?
No, nothing. Everything in my suitcase belongs to me.
Are you bringing any food items, plants, or agricultural products into the country?
No, I'm not. I know those items aren't allowed, so I made sure not to pack anything like that.
What about medication? Are you carrying any prescription drugs?
Just some basic over-the-counter medication, aspirin and allergy pills. Nothing that requires a prescription.
All right. Do you have any relatives or friends living in the United States?
I have a cousin in Seattle, but I'm not planning to visit her on this trip. We've stayed in touch online, but I haven't seen her in person for probably 8 years now.
I notice you've traveled quite a bit recently. You went to Japan last year.
Yes, that's correct. I spent 2 weeks there in October. It was mainly for vacation, but I also attended a design conference in Tokyo.
And before that, you visited several European countries.
Right. I've traveled around Europe fairly regularly for both work and leisure. I went to Berlin in June for a client meeting, and I took a short trip to Portugal in the spring.
You mentioned you work for a marketing agency. Do you plan to do any work while you're here in the States?
No, this is purely a vacation. I've made it clear to my clients that I'll be offline during this period. I need a proper break.
Understood. Just to confirm, you're not carrying more than $10,000 in currency.
Definitely not. As I mentioned, I have about $3,000 with me.
All right, everything seems to be in order. I'm going to stamp your passport now. You're approved for a 3-week stay. Make sure you depart before your authorized period expires.
I will. Thank you very much.
Enjoy your visit to the United States.
I appreciate it. Have a good day.
That was a typical immigration interaction. Pretty straightforward, wouldn't you say?
It was, but I think the traveler handled it well. He was polite, direct, and had all his information ready.
That's key. Immigration officers appreciate clear, concise answers. You don't need to over-explain, but you should be prepared to provide details if asked.
What I found interesting was the mix of tenses throughout the conversation. The officer asked, "Have you been to the United States before?" using present perfect.
Because he's asking about the traveler's entire life experience up to now, not about a specific moment. Compare that to when the traveler answered, "I visited about 5 years ago." There he switched to past simple because he was talking about a specific, completed trip.
And then later, "I've traveled quite a bit recently," with present perfect again, because he's talking about his recent travel history as a whole, not one particular trip.
Right. The distinction matters for clarity. If you're talking about your general experience or something that connects to the present moment, present perfect works better. If you're describing a specific past event, past simple is the way to go.
Another thing worth noting, the traveler anticipated questions. When asked about his stay, he didn't just say 3 weeks. He added that he had a return flight booked, which answers the follow-up question before it's even asked.
That's smart. It shows you're organized and you've thought things through, which tends to make these interactions smoother and shorter.
And he stayed calm. Even when asked about work or money, he didn't get defensive. He just answered honestly.
That's the attitude you want. Remember, these questions are standard procedure. They're not personal attacks.
All right, let's move on to our final conversation for today.
This one's quite different from the previous two. We're going to listen to a couple discussing their monthly expenses.
Now, I know that might not sound particularly exciting, but this type of conversation is incredibly useful for learners.
Why is that?
Well, for one thing, it's a situation most people deal with regularly, whether you're managing a household budget, splitting costs with roommates, or just tracking your own spending.
True. But there's another reason this conversation is valuable from a learning perspective.
The numbers.
Exactly. When people talk about finances, you get exposed to all kinds of figures, amounts, percentages, dates, account numbers, and let's be honest, understanding numbers when someone speaks them quickly in English can be challenging.
It really can. Hearing the difference between 15 and 50, or catching whether someone said 1,300 or 3,000, requires practice.
And this conversation will give you plenty of that. The couple goes through various expenses, so you'll hear different amounts and formats throughout.
It's also a good example of how couples or partners negotiate and discuss financial matters in English. They disagree on some points, but they keep the conversation constructive.
Right. It's a discussion, not an argument. They're both trying to understand where their money is going and make decisions together.
So pay attention not just to the vocabulary and numbers, but also to how they express concern, ask for clarification, and reach agreements.
Let's listen to their conversation.
All right, so I've been looking at our bank statement, and I think we need to talk about this month's expenses.
I know. We went over budget again, didn't we?
By about $475, yeah. I'm not upset, but we should figure out where all this money is going.
Fair enough. What are the biggest expenses?
Well, rent is obviously the largest, $2,200. That's not changing. Then utilities came to $318 this month.
318? That seems higher than usual.
It is. Last month was $260. I think the air conditioning bill jumped because of that heat wave we had.
Right, that makes sense. What about groceries?
Groceries were $893.
$893? Ryan, that's almost $900 for groceries.
I noticed that too. We've been ordering more specialty items, and those organic products cost significantly more.
True, but maybe we should reconsider some of those purchases. What else?
Dining out was $542.
Okay, that's definitely an area we can cut back on. We've been eating out way too frequently.
At least 3 or 4 times a week, I'd say. If we reduce that to maybe once a week, we could save around $350 to $400 monthly.
Agreed. What about the car payment?
That's $375, same as always. And insurance is $192.
Those are fixed, so nothing we can do there. Did you include gas?
Yes, fuel was $216 this month. A bit high, but we did drive to your parents' place twice.
Right. That's about 140 miles each way. What about subscriptions? I feel like we're paying for services we barely use.
Let me check. We've got Netflix at $15.99, Spotify Family Plan at $16.99, the gym membership is $89 for both of us, and that meal kit service you signed up for is $72 per week.
Wait, $72 per week? That's almost $300 a month.
$288 to be exact. And honestly, we've only used it twice since you subscribed.
I thought it would help us cook more at home, but you're right, we should cancel that.
That would save us a significant amount. What about your student loan payment?
That's $412 monthly. There's no way around that one.
Understood. I also noticed some random purchases. Amazon orders totaling $167, clothing for $98, and some home items for $53.
The home items were necessary. We needed new towels and a bath mat. But the Amazon stuff, I'll admit, was mostly impulse buying.
We all do it. I spent $47 on video games last month that I didn't really need.
So, what's our total for the month?
Including everything, we spent $6,375.
And our combined income after taxes is
$5,900.
So we're $475 in the red. We definitely need to make some changes.
If we cancel the meal kit service, cut back on dining out, and both of us avoid impulse purchases, we could probably save around $700 monthly.
That would actually put us ahead by about $200, which we could put into savings.
Exactly. Should we commit to this for next month and see how it goes?
Let's do it. I'll cancel the meal kit subscription tonight.
And I'll meal plan for the week so we're not tempted to order takeout.
Deal. Thanks for going through all this with me.
Of course, we're in this together.
That conversation covered a lot of ground financially.
It did. And you could hear how many different numbers came up. Everything from small amounts like $15.99 to larger figures like $6,375.
That's the challenge with listening to financial discussions. You need to catch not just the numbers themselves, but also understand what they refer to.
Right. Context is everything. When Ryan said 318, Claire immediately understood he was talking about utilities because they'd just mentioned that category.
I also appreciated how they approached the discussion. Neither of them got defensive when pointing out excessive spending.
They were solution-focused. Instead of blaming each other, they identified problems and worked together to find ways to reduce expenses.
The phrase, "we're in this together," at the end really captured that spirit of partnership.
And practically speaking, this conversation showed useful vocabulary for anyone who needs to discuss finances, whether it's with a partner, roommate, or even in a professional context. And, well, that brings us to the end of today's episode.
We covered 3 different scenarios: compliments between friends, an immigration control interaction, and a couple discussing their budget.
Hopefully these conversations gave you some practical examples of English in real-world situations.
If you found this episode helpful, please consider giving it a like. It really helps us reach more learners.
And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future episodes. We'll be bringing you more conversations and practical English content regularly.
We'd also love to hear from you in the comments. What topics would you like us to cover? What kinds of conversations would be most useful for your learning?
Your feedback shapes the direction of this podcast, so please share your thoughts.
Thanks so much for listening today.
Until next time, keep practicing and stay curious.
See you in the next episode.